Hello, and welcome to the first ever Liam&Sam vlogs.
Today we will be discussing the Cold War, which, as we will see, is more of like a microwave dinner war.
It has hot and cold parts.
Because we only have 6 minutes, we're going to discuss a couple of specific events from the Cold War and why they're still relevant today.
The first thing we are going to discuss is the Soviet-Afghan War.
But Sam, why does this matter?
Glad you asked. We'll see in a moment.
So first, we need some background information.
After World War II, Afghanistan was being ruled by King Mohammed Zahir Shah. He ruled from 1933 to 73. He was quite an interesting bloke, but again, we only have 6 minutes, so let's move on.
He was overthrown by the Marxist People's Democratic Party of Afghanistan, the PDPA, headed up by Nur Mohammad Traki. The government had close relations with the USSR.
This, coupled with the fact that they ascribed to Marxists, made the US less than happy.
Then the US ambassador was killed by the Satimi militants, which made the US even less pleased.
So the US is unhappy. Why did it break down to fighting?
The conflict was so large and complex, taking more than 1 million people's lives, and we only have 6 minutes, so we're going to discuss a few points.
So let's make this like a proton and split it into 3 parts.
There were a few main Afghani groups involved in the conflict. The first being the Afghan government, the PDPA, who were involved because they wanted to remain in power.
The second being the Mujahideen rebels.
There was an Islamic political group fighting because they opposed the reforms made by the PDPA government, such as
Land reforms, marriage reforms, the minimum age for marriage was raised, and equal education for men and women. And also because their protest of these issues was being violently put down by the government.
There were also groups of Afghan Arabs who wanted to jihad against the atheist communists. Some things just never change.
The Soviet Union was the most significant non-national belligerent in this conflict. This was in fact the only time in the Cold War the USSR deployed troops outside the Soviet bloc.
Initially, they supported President Tarakim's regime with equipment, finances, and military assistance. Eventually, after a number of divisions were sent into Afghanistan to assist the government against the rebels, the USSR sent in the 40th Army.
The US under President James Carter, though not directly involved in the conflict, played a huge role in the war. They provided weapons, CIA training, and funds to the Mujahideen rebels and a number of the so-called Afghan Arab groups.
The Mujahideen, although this is disputed by some, almost definitely formed the beginnings of the Taliban.
And one of those little Afghan Arab groups was organised and ran by a young Arab named, and you win no prizes for guessing this one, Osama bin Laden, whose Arab group eventually evolved into Al-Qaeda. Oops.
Okay, so now we get to talk about something involving the Reagan administration, the NSC, the CIA, and Congress actually for once doing something, aptly called the Iran-Contra affair.
This conflict started in 2 different places in the world, which got combined under the plan of the Reagan administration.
The US is still at a standoff with the USSR.
In Nicaragua, the US had been meddling in politics for a good long while.
But at this point in history, the US was supporting the democratic rebels fighting against the communist government.
Meanwhile in Iran, a new leader came to power named Ayatollah Khamenei. Pretty close. Who decided to turn Iran from one of the US's best buddies in the Middle East to an enemy virtually overnight.
He did this by turning the oil-rich country into a religious state, claiming Israel to be an illegitimate country, and immediately cutting ties with the United States.
Iran then went to war with Iraq, and Iran needed weapons.
The Iranian government also took several American hostages.
And as we all know, the US does not negotiate with terrorists.
So the Reagan administration was willing to sell weapons to the Iranian government in exchange for the American hostages.
Congress voted against this, and banned Reagan's team from selling weapons through the CIA.
But surprisingly, they just used another institution called the NSC, the National Security Council.
The United States then used the profits from selling weapons to Iran to support the rebels in Nicaragua.
An Iranian newspaper uncovered the affair, and several members of the Reagan administration and the NSC were respectively told to remove themselves from the office, meaning they were fired. And 4 were charged with felonies.
Though Reagan himself was not charged and claimed that he had no prior knowledge.
We just looked at 2 extremely contentious topics from the Cold War era, and I would say that they still hold significant impact.
The Soviet-Afghan War was significant for a couple of reasons.
First of all, the country Afghanistan has been in a state of war ever since.
And secondly, it led both directly and indirectly to the formation of groups like the Taliban, Al-Qaeda, and ISIS.
And the Iran-Contra affair is significant because it destabilized both Nicaragua and Iran in ways that they have yet to recover from.
If you're going to pay attention to anything from this video, pay attention to this. Your actions, for better or worse, have an impact on the future of this planet. So next time you favour one group over another, remember that it may come back to haunt you. Thanks for watching. We'll see you later.